for public arts. Oops. Oh, okay. That is going to fund this project tonight. So over these years, we've been collecting money from developers to go right into this fund to create a piece of wonderful art in Central Park. And here we are tonight talking about doing that. So I want to thank all of you who are participating or going to give your input tonight. It's really valuable that we get that from the community because public art, you know, it really is for the community. It's about the place that it's in, why that place is important, what it says about our community, kind of the culture, the values of our community. All that is tied up in what public art is. And you know, the committee unanimously selected RDG. We were very excited about not just their past work, all that we got to see on that, but their process, kind of how they go about researching the community, what our identity and our values, as I said, you know, all of that, what goes into how they come up with the design. So I'm really excited to see what that will be. And part of, you know, tonight is just a big part of that process. So again, thanks to everyone that's here tonight. And I'm just looking forward to hearing your input.
Thank you. And before RDG introduces themselves and gets started, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping items for those of you who are new to the webinar functionality of Zoom and Zoom in general. All of you have at the bottom of your screen some options. There's an option to raise your hand during the presentation. If you have any questions, we can call on you and unmute you and give you the opportunity to speak. And then there is also at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. And so if you do have questions and you're a little shy about unmuting your mic, then that's another way that you're able to participate. We'll check out the question and then we'll answer it, and everybody will be able to see. The question will be submitted without people being able to see, but once all of the questions have been answered, individually you'll be able to see each question and answer posted to that window. And along the way, we'll be sure to make sure that everybody is input, and we'll go ahead and give it off to RDG at this point.
Great. All right, here we go. So everyone can see the screen. We've got, we're wonderful. Thank you very much for the introduction, Lynn. My name is Matt Niebert, an artist here at our studio, RDG Art Studio, and I'm joined here with David and Doug, team members here. We'll all introduce ourselves. We're happy to see everyone virtually, but being in Iowa right now, it's about 28 degrees and we have 12 inches of snow outside. So of course we wish we could dearly be there in person to enjoy what we've seen already. Some of the beautiful early spring, almost looks like in some of the pictures that we've seen. So thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it off to David.
I heard they were selling vaccines out there in California. we might have to come out there. Thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you. If we're lucky, maybe we'll all get to be in the same room before this project is over. My name is David Dahlquist. I'm an artist and designer and teacher, and it's been my good fortune to collaborate with Matt and Doug for many years on large-scale installations all over the country.
I'm Doug Adamson. I'm a landscape architect. Been active with the art studio for many years at RDG.
And Doug Hansen, project manager for the art studio, and really excited to dive into the project.
I am going to go ahead and advance and we'll get going here. I believe. There we go. Our agenda, Ashley had shared this. We're just really briefly, we're going to, we've had a little introduction to the RFP, and thank you, Lynn, for introducing us to the importance of this being a reflection of the values of the community. I think that's a great way to introduce the tasks that we're excited to start with. We're going to have a little bit of a dialogue about what is public art, just to introduce content, present some of our projects, and then most importantly, we want to share with you what we've done with the steering committee as our first chance to review the site. we also did a virtual site visit just last week with the group. I sort of got a chance to walk through virtually with folks, and some of our preliminary research. And then, of course, the Q&A and survey and polling that we think will help with our dialogue. So, introduced our team. Again, we are part of, I think it's interesting to share just a little bit of detail. Our studio is part of a larger planning and design firm. And so these are all artists in our studio that work together, specifically working with public art. But we also are fortunate to be part of an architecture and landscape design professionals, interior design professionals, videographers, lighting design specialists. And so we come from a place of collaboration with lots of different design professionals. And we think that that really brings richness to the project work that we do. We have a lot of experts that we can also navigate through on the process. So some pictures of our studio. Where we are right now on the right-hand side is sort of our design space, a multi-use space. On the left, importantly, is the maker part of our studio. We are about a 10,000 square foot facility that is filled with all the different capabilities of clay. And maybe, David, you could share a little bit.
Otherwise known as clean and dirty.
That's right.
Now, we are fortunate to be hands-on. So not only do we design, we can, in a comprehensive way, experiment with a variety of materials. And originally, it was ceramic and GFRC, glass, some metal. And then over the years, we've developed a really close network of professionals that we work with that can basically do anything at a larger scale, be it metal or concrete or whatever the case may be.
An example of some of our maker capabilities, we often mock up projects full scale. This is an example of one where we're able to test lighting and use our woodshop and CNC capabilities to start to craft elements of pieces as part of our process. What should be coming up here is something that we're going to ask you to just kind of have in your minds, some real basic questions about how do you use Central Park? I will share with you, this is questions that will also be, I believe, sharing a Survey Monkey for participants, and Ashley will help us understand how to get to these things and perhaps record the links for those who weren't able to join us tonight. But we're really interested in gathering people's opinions and generating discussion. And there's no right or wrong answers to any of this. It's really about a dialogue.
We are really happy and eager to listen to you. So, this is, in a way, getting your own wheels turning. Some of this, you're going to share observations with us tonight, but you're also going to have time after this to digest it and share your observations with us. What is public art? We thought it might be worthwhile to try to go through this quickly, because I think it helps to set a context both for our work, the nature of our work, as well as your project. And so one of the things that we talk a lot about, in fact, it's kind of our raison d'etre, story, structure, and site. And so these three things, the stability of the three-legged stool, the triumvirate, we try to really pay attention to these elements, but it's guided largely first by the story. And that means research. That means talking to you and doing exactly what we're doing tonight before we begin to propose anything. So we're not relying on preconceived ideas. We're not relying on a style in any way that we've used before. It's a matter of being responsive to you and your site. So these are distinctions in the public art process, and process is a big factor in it. And we're going to touch base very briefly on all of these elements. And I think, to one degree or another, our work, we have done all of these different types of things, depending upon the community, depending upon the project, depending upon the budget that is associated. This might be one of the main points, I think. Robert Irwin, who has worked a lot out in California, in fact, a famous sculptor. He spoke at the Art Center many years ago. And one of the things that he said was, well, we got to get the idea of public art straight first. First of all, years ago, there was never really a word public art as a genre. You might see a statue out in the park, and that was considered a kind of connotation for art placed in the public realm. But he said what has happened is that public art has evolved so much that it's really not the same as it used to be. Yes, there's still pieces of art that we can place here or there in a given setting, but now public art denotes a process that is responsive to working with you, with people, with how people are going to use a site. What is the experience going to be? And oftentimes, many different committees, from architects to public to government, you're really taking into account all of these different factors. So public art has changed. So we'll hit on these in just a minute, but they all have a place. And what we're trying to do is drill into your site to understand what is the right way to solve your site, your project. This, I think, is interesting in the landscape as public art. And one of the first things that we do, especially with the help of Doug, a landscape architect, we think about what is the existing. You have a beautiful, beautiful park. And so, there's elements of stewardship, not ownership. Instead of what, is imposed on it, what might grow out of it? Another classification is art that we add to the landscape. And so it's got a connection, and it needs to be dependent upon the environment. And oftentimes it's temporary versus permanent. That picture in the upper right-hand corner, I think, is a very interesting piece of public art. Those are shallow little trays of water that fill in with the seasons. So they're constantly changing color. They're like a painting in the outdoors. And I think it's just a very beautiful, connected, lyrical piece in the landscape. And then, of course, what a lot of people might consider public art, the big destination object. And, you look at the Cernan Arch in St. Louis, that was very controversial at the time. And now that's the gateway to the West. Now that's a museum. Now that is synonymous with St. Louis. And so scale, we'll talk more about scale this evening, but scale becomes a very important consideration. Not just how big something is, but how does it take into account the surroundings? And how does it take into account a person, right? Body to body, above your eye level, how you use it. Design integration, this is something that we are really fascinated by. And so, you've got the whole idea of function. Years ago, somebody might have said, what do you mean, a railing? A railing is public art? Absolutely, a railing in terms of casting shadow, positive, negative, color, texture. All of these are different materials. They function. They might be a bench. They might be a paver. They might be a lighted column. And so a lot of this now is also associated with placemaking, with creative placemaking. Experiential. I love the one with the food. That's taken at the end of the Las Ramblas in Barcelona, where color spills like a movie out of their outdoor market. And so the whole idea of what has happened with art exhibits, flea markets, the art show, that is a activity that is experiential. And of course, it sells food and it sells music. And so all of these things are related. In the upper left, that's fire on water. So these are things that you experience. Historic narrative, that's a whole nother unique genre. What happened there? Is there something that you want to hang your hat on that you would like to make people more aware of or appreciate more? Ways of integrating historic narrative could be the plaque, could be a sign, could be wayfinding, many different ways of integrating historic narrative. And this, I think, is probably the most recent development to the whole genre of public art, and that is social policy and practice. And it represents things that you can do, not on a huge budget. This happens to be the piece that was voted the #1 piece of public art, although I hate ranking things like that. But it's from Brazil. And this artist painted and celebrated the junk wagons throughout the city. He raised the level of stature and created a whole buzz around them that people now responded to and celebrated these individuals that were out there picking up their garbage and selling things for penny. And it changed their mindset in the city. And so people like Theaster Gates in Chicago creating an African American library, lots of different people that are enacting policy as public art. All of which basically sets up this idea for us, and that is we're trying to share our thought process with you about how we work and how we're approaching your project.
We thought we'd share a few of our previous examples. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Weight of Your Heart, Weight of a Feather is a project for Leawood Justice Center in Leawood, Kansas. And it's in front of a new public building that involves the law courts and the police stations. And there was a design brief asking to interpret Lady Justice. And so, as we had mentioned, part of that research was to think about how could we speak to that desire to refer to Lady Justice, but look at symbology. And so part of our research led us back to some of these early ideas about the balance scales, the fulcrum. It also pointed us to research a little bit about nature and understanding the symbology that's involved in with nature. And so that really is part of our research process that inspired this. We have a particular love of nature, and David, you have brought to us many things from your studies on that.
You know, there's a quote that I love by Elbert Hubbard, who was the poet laureate of the Roycrofters. Years ago, he said, if you love art, or if you aspire to the arts, you loved nature first. And so for a lot of artists, they go all the way back to their first walk in the woods with their parents, and they never forget that. And so, you know, we've done a lot of research about aspects of nature. There's a quasi-science that's called floriography that deals with the language and the meaning, symbolic and medicinal, to most of the organic world.
In addition to that, of course, we're always looking at context. And for your project especially, there's a beautiful central library, and we've done some research and been introduced to the history there and understand how both the park and the library are such a core element to that city center, and in some ways another cultural heart in the city. And so we'll always be thinking about where people are connected by paths, how you might walk through something, relationship to scale, framing experiences. And we work both digitally and by hand. And so this is just some examples really quickly of some of the kinds of things that we do from a digital process in the manufacturing and working with our colleagues, where we can exchange not only sketches, but digital file information that gets translated into these objects as we're working on them. So in our own studio, we work with laser cutters and develop mock-ups and start to look at scale, and importantly, I think the integration of natural light, if it's sited outside, the idea of shadows. We often talk about how do you enter into a project, walking through, walking underneath, sitting next to. Those are all important issues. And so these are tools that we will use along with looking at materiality. This happens to be examples of weathering steel that starts up on the left, a very fresh weathering steel that then becomes patinaed at the end and has a protective coating. It is its own sort of paint surface that protects it. we want to be sensitive to the marine environment and understand the materials we're using. So we'll be looking at those kinds of issues as we develop the concepts. Another thing we're always thinking about is the actual installation. So we love it when we can find team members that will help us craft and build sort of in the protection of our own warehouse, and then lightly touch the landscape as it's being installed. We find there's lots of advantages in order to, again, maximize the impact of the scale of the work.
I think one of the greatest things about sculpture is learning things that you don't know, and trying things specifically because you've got to learn something. It happens to be on this project, we worked with a company who is considered maybe one of the greatest metallurgists in the country. And so, we're bouncing ideas off of them and they're bouncing ideas off of us. And it drove the solution to a better place.
Lighting is always a key issue that we'll look at in terms of how a piece is transformed from day to night. And I think we've learned some things about the lighting in your park, in your site, and understanding that very low light level. And so thinking about being conscious of that is important.
This happens to be part of a walking trail. It's both a pedestrian scale, yet it also has a vehicular experience as well. And so, time is a big factor in public art. How long is a person going to spend there? Are you inviting them inside something so that they would feel contained by it? Those are all different measurements of time that we think about.
The next project is a sun pavilion. This is in El Paso, Texas. And again, contextually, we'll get into this. It was something interesting to evaluate different aspects of the site and where you might put what kind of work where. And so we wanted to share this as just an understanding about different things like gateway features or iconic features or multiple features that you might put along a path. And so we had the opportunity to evaluate with this team in looking at this very, very large sports complex and trying to find where we might place something that would be impactful. And we discovered through the use that there was this wonderful moment in the evenings when families came together and were enjoying sports, that they would have food trucks, and there was a natural gathering spot. And so through that understanding from the community and through being there and how the space is used, it really guided us about the best location, and it triggered the design, some of the aspects of the design, not to mention the beautiful view of the pass, the namesake El Paso, that's there from that field. So again, as part of the research, close to that area is a place called Hueco Tanks, which has an amazing 10,000-year plus history about people gathering and marking this unique space in the desert. Hueco Tanks is Spanish for hollows, and it was a place where water collected naturally. And so it became this oasis. It became a very sacred place. And there's pictographs that are described there. And so we were really interested in the idea of the mask and wanting to, the human touch that's put in there. That became something that we wanted to point to. Pottery, members pottery, there's a symbolic quality to these elements. If you learn about the pottery, that significance of the bowl being broken and your spirit passing through that opening and those kinds of things all started to seep into how do we respond to these kind of unique cultural elements from this region. So the next screen starts to show some of the patterning, again, with nature. We were struck by the particular time we were there, seeing the desert rose of paradise there. A beautiful plant, very common plant, but also strikingly colorful. And we began to look at patterns and did studies about also gathering and orientation because of the importance of the sun, and thinking about how it's sort of sunny there 365 days a year. So those all became elements that inspired looking at that. And as we developed that pattern, we started to remember the pictographs and started thinking about, is there a way we could point to or hint at and create a sense of wonder and a connection in the piece? Again, through drawing, making small models, considering color and the light, looking at details with pattern and color. And of course, through computer modeling, being able to suggest and think about lighting and what effects might happen as an element. So the site we chose was sort of at the southwest corner of this complex, and it really became a gateway feature. And what we saw is an opportunity to sort of frame this moment and to create a gathering spot that would simply invite in and be iconic at the same time. This happens to be a metal polychromed aluminum panels and steel frames with a plaza space. And we were very excited to work with them and extend the idea to include benches, which you'll see in a couple of photos coming up, that became really a focal point for gathering.
A lustrous finish that really responds to not only natural daylight, but to the lighting that you'll see interior illumination in a minute.
I think the transformation, again, is something that we're always kind of looking for and interested in seeing and thinking about. Echoes again of that pottery in the members' bowls, the symbolic quality of an oculus and an opening. I think that's an important thing to allow someone's mind to wander, to have multiple interpretations to a piece. You can see some of the seating elements that we were able to design, again, inspired by the idea of the hollows, Waco tanks, as just the gathering elements there. And I think, again, just thinking about the qualities at night and the idea of being able to be a beacon. Next piece is in San Antonio, Texas, Rippling Waters. This is one that was really inspired by nature again. This is a Elmdorf Lake along the creek systems there, inspired by the water and the textural qualities of simply enjoying that. Inspired us to study again with models, how might we create a walking path as an entrance element that you're able to walk through and invite you towards an entrance. And so this one was also interesting. We were able to collaborate with Carmen Traffola, the poet laureate there in Texas, to introduce text. She was a writer that grew up in this neighborhood and offered an opportunity to collaborate using some of her poetry and inscribing that in the piece as we went through. We're always looking for ways to invite people into, I think, multiple ways into the piece.
She had actually played in that river. And so we took a video, in fact, of reflections off a bridge that helped, set up that pattern for us.
Stainless steel and lighting. And on all of these, you'll see that we try very hard to be able to work with the team to develop a landscape that gives the piece some grounding and connects it. I think you'll see there's always some interest in pathways as well as landscape is always an important part. It's not necessarily a concrete pedestal with a piece of art, but it's part of a larger environment as much as we can support.
Perfect example.
Yeah, Como, Texas.
Connection to an existing trail.
Commemorative piece wanted to celebrate two important founding members of this community, African American community in Como, Amon Carter and William Wilburn. And so this was one where we were able to do research historically in working with the community to, the editor, William Wilburn, was an important connector through the neighborhood newspapers. And so we were able to look through archives and talk to the steering committee and actually relatives of, to celebrate and learn about the importance of different editorial work that he had put in there. And that became the inspiration for inscriptures or writings from the editorials that were engraved in the steel plates. And so it's a gathering spot, place to sit. It, on the one hand, frames nature, looking out towards the lake and the park. On the other hand, if you can imagine, this frames the view back to the neighborhood. And so it's quite literally a connection of the neighborhood to the park.
Had it not been for the pandemic, this would have been the 75th anniversary of a parade on the 4th of July that commemorates the handshake, in effect, between these two people when the land was deeded to become a park.
So again, process, being able to work with fabricators that we've enjoyed working with. This is an engraving process, which again, through that dialogue, I think, what was it, Doug? Something like how many hours on a plate of engraving time here. So we have to be really careful and understand the realities of executing some of that work, and really be something we work with our team members quickly and closely. Huntsville, Alabama is another project we're really excited to get going on. I think there's some parallels in thinking about different kinds of site. This one includes something that's a gateway feature, sort of iconic, on the lower right-hand side, which introduces in a pedestrian vehicular speed. At City Center, there's a pause, a gathering, a shelter space. And again, at Bring Spring Park, there's another framing element and an invitation, a larger element. Inspired, about the idea of trajectory and doing some research in terms of obviously the impact and the history of this aerospace history that's with Huntsville. Thinking about how we can create spaces and rooms within a large park that serve both as a gathering and maybe a gateway element together. Lighting. I think this was interesting. This is a little detail that we found in the site visit. These were embedded, sort of look like just sort of staples, but in the history of the development of Huntsville, really with the fiber, cotton, transformation of fiber into thread, these were little elements called travelers after we had done some research, and they're embedded in the old mills there. And that history and that embedded history became something that we wanted to pick up on and inspired some of the bench designs that became a way again to point to specifically their history there and the transformation from one industry to another, and how that's create quite a vibrant community. Shade structure. So we get to the good stuff now. On your site and your pictures, these were elements that were shared during the brief that would introduce us to, you'll see on the left, the proposed area, which is a sort of a big circle. And in our kickoff meeting and in getting through some of the site research and design, pre-design work that we've been doing together, and research, we've been able to begin to really understand how the park is used. We'd love to hear more about how you use the park. We've learned something about the contours, accessibility. We've learned a lot about some of the different functions with the amphitheater and the enjoyment of seeing shows from the grass areas, Talbot Meadow, the enjoyment of open space that's really important. And I see, Ashley, we have a raised hand. Is there something there we'd like to introduce, a question?
Yes, Mr. Amory Hansen had a question for us.
Okay, please.
Amory, if you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I can go ahead and save it to the end. I'm just taking notes. I just wanted to get my hand raised.
Okay, you got it.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. So in our initial discussion, we had started to look at 3 different locations, site A, B, and C. And I think we're at a point where we've started to closely consider site A and site B for some of the qualities of that. And we can get into that as we go through here. But I think, again, being conscious of when someone might first encounter the piece, how it might draw someone deeper into the park. We've learned about and saw actually during our virtual tour on a Thursday morning, all the wonderful traffic, people walking and using the path in there. Was really inspiring to see folks using this. We've learned a little bit about the secret garden. We'd love to learn some more about that. We know that's an important aspect too in these two sites, as well as considerations to the fountain and the library that's there. This is Site A, sort of standing a little bit up on the hill, looking at the path towards Lake Talbot. And these, again, thank you, Nancy, I believe, who took these photos for us after we had our site visit tour. We sort of honed in on a few of these. I remember the day the geese were quite active as they were flying around there. It was kind of nice to see and hear about some of the nature that lives there. So those kinds of things are wonderful to hear and to see and start to understand. And of course, this is kind of a panoramic view looking back up. I think we talked a lot about the slope and accessibility here. And I think that's one of the things we're looking at right now with Site A and Site B is to be conscientious and aware of, we'd love to have people be invited into a place. And so we think definitely something that's adjacent to, next to the path is important.
Can you see the library from the installation? Can you see the installation from the library?
Right. A view towards Site B, and you can sort of see the Lake Talbot as it sort of dog legs around to the back there. It's wonderful. And then even too, as you get up on the hillside, the ability to see the sculpture from different elevations. You had mentioned that. I think we have to be aware there's all sides are, it's potentially an installation in the round in terms of people seeing and experiencing this. There isn't necessarily a front and a back, but those will be elements that we'll really want to think about carefully.
And I think the orientation of whatever it is that we come up with is going to also be very important with the sun, how daylight moves across that space.
Yeah. Scale will be a really important thing that we want to consider. I think this is one of the major pathways. Our amphitheater would be off to our right, sort of over our right shoulder here. Understanding there's multiple ways into the park. We understand there is an access, I think, more to the north, and maybe I think it is to the east, that is off of the boulevard. That's a way to get into. There's a major parking and very convenient from the library area. So we're thinking about how do you access? Where are people likely to be traveling? There's, we understand, a nice path that loops around Talbot Lake and connects. It's a great view of the meadow looking back towards the library. And then a few snapshots from inside the library during our virtual tour. Wonderful reading stacks and understanding. We started to do some research about the inspiration behind the library and understanding how it's designed was to really always be thinking about making those connections to the park and nature. Visually, this looking out to the north is a classic way to look at the landscape where the sun is sort of always at your back and the landscape is always beautifully lit. It really makes for a beautiful scene, a beautiful backdrop. Of course, cherry blossoms and the cherry. So that started to trigger our questions really as we move through here too. One of the things that when we were initially kicking around ideas was this notion that was talked about in the design of the library, and there was a mention about being responsive or understanding nature's horizontal plane of reflection. And so there'll be phrases like that that will really start to, I think, help us get our arms around and understand a little bit through doing the research and doing listening, essentially, too, of what people are responding to. This is kind of interesting to see the library at the left when it was first realized in 1975. You sort of understand the park was at a very young stage at that point, and the two were in relationship to each other then. But both the architect and the designer, as well as the important directors in the library that inspired it, we really talked about the qualities of water and the idea of the fountains and water splashing out and that idea of being connected to nature. And so those are all going to be key things that we're going to be looking for, I think, to inspire our piece. Can't wait to see the restoration of the fountains. It's going to be beautiful. We see quite literally that plane of reflection where Lake Talbot is sort of brought almost right to your feet as you're sitting in the reading room. Be wonderful. And David, I don't know, we might pause a little bit on this image. We really were inspired by some of the qualities here. I think there's sort of three really interesting qualities where we see sort of the geometry and the insertion of this architecture in a way, but through its comparison with nature. So the idea of this planted piece on the right, you sort of see this natural organic, and then you see that compared to the rails. And so there's this dialogue between organic and orthogonal. Or you see the water and just the quality of how something that's really rigid and orthogonal suddenly becomes transformed through this plane of reflection in there. And so there's these beautiful moments that happen. And finally, up in the upper left hand, you see the reflection of the sunlight on the underside of the roof. So there's this element of light and reflection that's just so beautiful elements right there.
You know,
in the
Nutra,
piece.
your architect, was thinking in very similar terms: story, structure, and site. And so the building is a lantern purposefully at night. The building reflects nature. And so in this one image that you see, you really have all the ingredients. You know, you have a geometry that plays against something that is organic. And those are things that I think hit us in a very dramatic way. Now, how it informs the piece, that's what we're, starting to get into. I mean, what shape does that draw out? What texture does that draw out? What material does that suggest? But that's, where we are, of course. And that's a great, great image.
We found this early on when we were first doing the initial research, and this is in some ways is a very early form of public art as well, a Boy Scout project, introducing the public, inviting them into the park to learn a little bit about it.
Educational.
Educational.
It leads you from place to place. So there's an implied story in it. I can't get over the fact that you've got this fantastic butterfly's wing, and it's, I think it's a monarch or,
Yeah.
and then you have the shape of the overall park, which really takes on a wing form. I think there's something there as well.
Yeah. So the invitation to enjoy aspects of the park, definitely going to be a key element that we want to find a way to respond to. And history as well. The mention, I think, that Nevin had brought about the arches, Pacific Coast Highway, Main Street intersection from some time ago, the idea of welcoming and marking. And on the right-hand side, of course, that reflection, I think you see a sunset being reflected on those windows, just an amazing color. So color is going to be really interesting to think about.
We talk a lot about the golden hour, and out there, of course, you probably get to see the golden hour more than we do. But, there's so many things associated with it. They say that in retail, people buy more. People's blood pressure goes down at that time when light is being reflected, and it's that amber color, that aura. There's things about health that's associated with it. And so it's something that we've taken into account on a lot of our pieces.
We've learned a bit about some of these elements here. We've been given some of the planning and understand some of the large crowds that can gather. So we understand there's going to be very active times and also very quiet times. And so we're curious to just learn and listen and hear about different ways that people use the park and might be inspired. I think we'd love to learn more about the association with the Tree Society, maybe a little bit more about the Secret Garden, etc. Just to understand context.
We included this because this is a project that happens to be in Des Moines, that we were the landscape architects of record here, and we worked with the Des Moines Art Center at the time. This is called the John and Mary Papa John Sculpture Park. And we wanted to just point out that, this is a unique situation in that they've created an outdoor gallery. It's not a garden as such. You don't see any flowers really. It is a park with very intentional paths that lead you from room to room like a gallery. And so we know that one of your objectives in the future is to potentially include more artwork in Central Park. And so we also want to be cognizant of that. We want to, think about what those future opportunities may be for other local artists.
And again, sharing some of the regional examples, Newport Beach, a rotating sculpture where artists are invited to do different pieces. I think the example of the California scenario, Noguchi's installation, is another very interesting textural piece. And I think we're going to learn and hear hopefully a lot more about different pieces that might strike people's interest, and just to understand what is it that catches interest there. More examples the teams had shared with us, that beautiful examples of color and introducing landscape form as well. So I think we'd love to just stop there, I think, and sort of these were the questions we had wanted to just help us understand. We'd love to open it up and hear what other questions there may be for folks.
Whatever your observations are related to these questions and others, we're here to listen to you and try to answer in whatever way we can. Amory?
We'll go ahead and get Amory unmuted.
Thanks. So looking at the project, I think to me, the third one was the one that in the examples. I think this was El Paso or the San Antonio one, and that was the one that most, I think, struck what I would like to see. I think one thing to consider in regard to the some sort of integration with the Cherry Blossom Festival, that is, of course, a very important event in Huntington Beach because it has connotations relating to our sister city relationship with Anjo, which I do think is important to highlight. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that I think the library should in some way be integrated into the art work, because obviously the Huntington Beach is the city of expanding horizons, and I think that's important to note. We often get perceived by our other nickname, Surf City, and I think this is an opportunity to use the other nickname in some way.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful analogy to say expanding horizons. I like that. That's very interesting. I see we have a couple of questions that are coming in. If it's okay, Ashley, I think I'll maybe just read them, and we'll keep them. I'm not sure if those are published or not, but they will be recorded. There's an individual who's says, please don't populate the park with lots of stuff. This is a natural area. Small cut by small cut, it's being turned into a hardscape. And so that's a great observation and question. I think that is something we'll be very sensitive to think about as we're planning and thinking about this. There's a natural beauty there, and I think we've heard that a lot of people seek that out, and this is a contrasting experience maybe to other areas in the city. The large sanctuary off to the, I believe it's to the north, a big birding draw in terms of people being able to go into even deeper nature and start to observe birds and do research that way. So we appreciate that comment. Another question for the designers: do they use dark sky lighting practices? The park is used by raptors, ducks, owls, and let's be careful not to further light pollute the place. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Great observation. There are some places where we have worked where they have actual dark skies initiatives. And so you have to really think about the lighting in specific ways. Down lighting, amount of lumens, the time that the lighting is on. We've worked in other areas where they didn't necessarily have ordinances, but we were asked to be very thoughtful about nature and about wildlife. And so, you know, we had different timers for different parts of lighting that would come on or go off, and they would have direct control of them. And so, yes, we would certainly take that into account.
You might talk a little about our lighting studio and our relationship with those designers.
We're very fortunate to get to work with several in-house certified lighting designers, one of whom actually has an MFA in theater lighting design, and he's an award-winning designer. They think about things related to tone and character, but they also think about things that are related to longevity, maintenance, wear. And so all of those things, you know, have to be considered in this.
We do have somebody with a Dell computer who has a question or would like to speak.
Please.
So you should be able to now. Whoever has the Dell computer. Your hand was raised. All right.
If there, hopefully there will be some other questions that come out of this, but we could ask you a question, and that's in this list here. What's your favorite time? If all of you go to the park, when do you go to the park? What time of the day is it that you're there?
Yeah, those would be great questions. I see, Ashley, there's another question. The question is about, will a local or California-based artist be involved? And if not, I think it's important. That's a great comment and a great question. I think, Ashley, I welcome either you and Lynn to speak to that in the process. I think one of our opinions is this is a great opportunity right now. I know on the committee, we have a couple of artists from the community that are informing the steering committee. And there's probably a great conduit there for input and for feedback. That's part of the response to that. Ashley, if you have something you'd like to add to that, or?
Sure. So we did release a RFP in 2020, and anybody who was interested was able to apply for this project, RDG being one of those applicants. And so it was a public process. The committee that is serving for the entirety of this project was on the interview panel. And like Lynn mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it was a 100% consensus that RDG was the best artist for this project. So through public involvement and with the involvement of many artists on the committee, we will continue to garner that involvement. But as far as spearheading this process, it will be RDG and then input from the committee. And then as we go through these public meetings, that'll be how we garner the public's involvement as well.
Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Lynn Zametta. So I thought it was really interesting, the comment that RDG made about the fact that this could become a sculptural garden type thing eventually, and that there would be opportunities for local artists. I really focused on that because being an artist myself and being very involved in the art community here in Huntington Beach, and knowing how many amazing artists we have here in our own city, let alone regionally, I've always wanted to see more opportunities for local artists. This is going to be a very large installation, and it definitely required I don't mean large in scale, but large in concept. And so, we don't know what it's going to look like in scale, but I think that, there are more opportunities to come, and I'd love to see more involvement by local artists. So I really appreciate that question by whoever asked it. And I think we need to really proceed with this project, and we're really excited about it. But I absolutely agree that I'd love to see more opportunities for local artists coming up in the future.
Okay, and then the Dell computer is actually Stephen Sherry Ingle. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and then on your end, you should be able to as well. And the unmute is on the bottom left of your screen.
Still muted.
There you go. You should be able to talk now. I can see that you're unmuted. It might be easier to type your question into the chat box. And we'll go ahead and move on to Lajari.
Oh,
Yes,
hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Oh, okay. Hi. I forgot why I raised my hand. I think it was to answer the question about the time I go to the park. I often go with my daughter after school. We go to the library and then we'll walk around the park. So afternoons when it's not so busy. But with the pandemic, we've been there tons, like almost every other weekend, walking around and enjoying and picking. Yeah, so that's sometimes early morning, and then right before the evening before it gets dark. So yeah, we've been there. I'm also part on the sister city, so I've been there for the cherry blossoms. So that's kind of a peak season when the cherry blossoms starts to bloom. So we might actually head out there in a couple of weeks just to check the progress on how the trees are doing. So afternoons, but we're there probably like all the time. So fall, all season, summertime, we're huge fans of it.
Yeah. How old is your daughter?
My daughter is 11 and we're originally from Los Angeles. So we've only been in Huntington Beach about 10 years. So compared to LA, we just love the fact that there's this amazing park here and we spend ton. We're always at the library too. So we love the library, how bright it is, the windows, to see out into the park. It just makes us feel so much at home. We just are completely in love. The sound of the fountain, that water makes us feel great. So we spend a lot of time studying in the lower level by the cafe in the library. One thing I was thinking about as a parent, my daughter and I used to spend a lot in the children's section of the library, and there's a good view of the park from there. There's also over the years been many nests that's been in the trees of different birds.
That's great.
So it would be nice, and I even just thinking about the park, I think about even on the other side of the park, I believe it's called the north side of the park, there's always like, and great developments about new birds that are coming in and hatching and babies. So I would love if there was something incorporated with animals or nature in a very organic way. I like art installations where you're surprised, like it doesn't stick out, but it's part of the ground or it's part of the earth or it's part something natural. So like along the path and the ground is raised up and you maybe have to come around and then you're immersed into something else. To me, I find that very appealing. It's very surprising. But yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, those are great observations. Thank you.
Okay.
I have another question when I think about that. Are there programs that maybe as a children's event or something that are hosted in the library that then, are an invitation to go explore in the park and make a connection between reading and learning and then actually getting out and being, firsthand touching?
Yes. Yes, the Secret Garden. I know the organization, or maybe there's someone who's there who could speak. They have lots of events. My daughter, we've been there when they were releasing butterflies and caterpillars over the years in the Secret Garden. What else was there? I can't remember, but there's been some events. They do have them at least a couple of times a year, depending on the season that we've attended over the years, where they different plantings and things like that too. So there's been a lot of development. So I don't know if it's been kind of quiet recently. They've been changing it and it's been growing over the years. And it's, as someone who lives here, it's just been amazing to see how it's grown and how like it's just improved. So, but there are lots of little events that they do put on to get the children involved. I don't know if it's in association with the actual library though. I think it's just part of something that the people who are responsible for the Secret Garden host themselves, and they announce maybe on social media or through their website.
We've wondered about storytelling outside or having reading hours in nature. Our own library here has a what's called Avid. They have writers that they bring in, and there have been occasions where they have shared their work outside. That would be something of interest, I think.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know the library. I don't know if the library itself does, but I know the Secret Garden, they've had like small events on the weekends and things like that, where, you know, mostly about varied nature, some smaller kind of reading of things and activities. That's true. I do remember there was an activity book and they had different stations set up where we could get a stamp or things like that. But I don't think it was related to the library. The library itself has a ton of amazing children's events throughout the year. They have a, you know, authors festival, which is quite big, where they have authors come in, and also they have one where the children actually do write stories and are given awards and things like that. There's an award ceremony and everything. So that's very big. I think it happens around the same time. So, and the theme changes every year too. So that's very, very big and very, very nice.
We actually have the manager from the library, Jessica Framson, in the Zoom meeting, and so I can give her a chance to elaborate on the programs and activities as well. So
yes, yeah, okay.
Great.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
all right, Jessica, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I wasn't sure how to be able to speak. I didn't see an unmute. So the Children's Department has collaborated with the Secret Garden to do a story time tie-in. So they've done some nature themes. They've done a butterfly release. And then there's a concept called Story Walk that a lot of libraries do, where they incorporate pages of a book and a story throughout nature. And so they'll take it through a park. And that's something that the Children's Department has talked about doing as well. Last summer, we had planned to do most of our summer reading program activities outside in the park, but then summer reading got canceled because of COVID. So we definitely want to move outside more, and it's something that we've talked about for the last couple of years, and we're working towards it.
Great.
Thanks, Jessica. Next up, we have Devin, who has a question, or one of our committee members.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
There was a question earlier about our choice and how we came to choose RDG. And I just wanted to explain how I came to my decision. We interviewed, 15 different artists, some of them local. Actually, I think quite a few of them were local. And then we narrowed it down to 5 that we actually did Zoom meetings with. And of those 5, RDG just showed the most professionalism in my mind of the artists that we were looking at. And for the first project that we're doing with these funds, we're all kind of learning here. We see it as a learning curve. And I think they're helping us to understand the process that we need to go through in order to make this actually happen. And also helping to basically set the bar so that down the road, we can invite in local artists that maybe haven't done a public project or dealt with a public agency before, and we can help them through the process. So I think this was kind of a learning curve for all of us, and I'm really thankful that RDG submitted a proposal, and I think they're going to be a good partner for this first project.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. You set the bar high. But we'll get there.
We will get there. Yeah, no, this is exciting. And this is what I think feeds us in terms of being a creative impulse, listening to these elements. I think that we had started to answer a lot of the questions that have come through. There's a couple of new ones from the computer that was formerly named Dell. I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to focus on that. It says, we hope the focus is on nature and less on Surf City, no surfboards or surfs or waves. Noted. I think that that's a good observation, a good comment, something that we'll definitely be thinking about. Additional comment from Dell. Owls love this area, so if that could be incorporated with the considerations of all the other animals, geese, ducks, etc., another important aspect. So yeah, sensitivity to the natural qualities of the park clearly is going to be important in the piece.
We had a long discussion about owls. We take them very seriously.
I love the bar owl. I see that there's an owl that changed in one of the icons there. That I live in an older part of the neighborhood that in the summertime at night, you can hear them start to do their calls. And I remember my own children just listening to that the first time. It was sort of in the oak trees right outside their window, and they came out and said, "What is that?" And it was scary. But it was also a chance to talk about, nocturnal animals, etc., all those things. So I love that nature imposes itself a little bit on you in the situation when actually we've been imposing on nature. But that dialogue of being having some empathy towards and learning and caring about those, it's a wonderful chance.
Just as an aside, they are haunting in a way. They are, in a lot of mythologies, the harbinger of death. They take you to the next world. But they also are seen in historic libraries because they are symbolic of wisdom, the wise old owl. And so if you look in history, in different cultures, there's different orientations to how they're used. Even the big phenomena, of Harry Potter, each one of them has their own spirit bird. And his, I think, is a white owl that takes him to the next place. So it's just something, to think about. Maybe an owl would be so glad to perch one day on this piece. We'll see.
Okay, we do have a few more people with their hands raised, so we'll go to Betty next.
Hello?
Betty, you're going to have to unmute.
There we go.
Oh, one more time.
Okay, it shows it unmuted.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Well, I do work in the Secret Garden, and I thought that it might be interesting for you to know that we do have areas that we've made into story circles. So we really do see a lot of little children that come through the garden. And I like the idea where when you're talking, one of you were talking about your first walk in the woods. And I think for a lot of these little kids, the nature is so exciting to them. And they think it's their garden, and they've kind of named it too. So I think that if we can keep that going, since it's going to be in that area, that would be really nice. And I like the idea of keeping the nature, because that's what we're lacking so much in cities is that experience of being out in the nature. So I think it's great that we have this area and that we can keep it for the kids. So that's it. That's what I called.
Great.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathy Shea.
I hope I'm unmuted.
There you are.
Thank you. Hi, you know my name. I am the city archivist for Huntington Beach. I'm also the chair of the Design Review Board, which normally weighs in on public art. And I am so impressed with these people doing this work for us. What a gift. A couple things I just wanted to make very clear and hope that they know about. and that our watchers tonight know about, is that, our site, the library was designed by this incredibly important team of Richard and Dion Neutra. I'm sure our consultants know that, but also that our basic landscape for Central Park was done by Ekbo, Dean, Austin, and Williams with help by Alfred Caldwell, who are so important. And I would love to sort of think that we're keeping that amazing contribution in mind as we go forward. All of them were very concerned about ecology and uniting the landscape outside the library with the landscape inside the library. We have lots of things to talk about there. I would also really hope that we consider accessibility, because I think, to me, that is a huge part of the library and the park. Rich or poor, underrepresented, whoever you are, this is a place you can come and celebrate, relax, learn, and be. And to me, that is so important. And then the last thing I would say is I was really impressed with the observation about circles. We think about the Neutra landscape, the Neutra building, as a lot of squares and rectangles, but there were at least 3 circles originally: the spiral walkway, the traffic turnaround, and then the first of 3 gardens. They're now been taken over by the 1994 expansion. They preceded the Secret Garden, all of which were gardens and welcoming, incredible spaces. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. And thank you so much. I am so impressed by the consultants we've got right now. And anything we can do to help, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kathy. Next, we have Sherry Engel.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm also a volunteer with HB Tree Society. And when we first started restoring the garden back in 2014, the fountains were actually working. And we used to love to work in there and in the background have this wonderful noise. But there were only maybe one place you could actually view, maybe the little tip top of the fountain. And we were hoping at one point that we could put something, a bench or something inside the secret garden in which to sit and view the fountains. But we have a issue with our very expanding plant footprint, which is the Pride of Madeira, which grows so tall that usually it obscures that view. So what I was thinking when you chose sites A, B, and C, that A would be probably a great place for the park and visitors to enjoy that view once the fountains are put back into working order. And the other thing is, I wasn't sure you were aware that the actual designer of the park that did work for EDAW back in early 70s is still alive. His name is Eric Katzmeyer, and he lives in Laguna Beach. And he might be somebody you might want to discuss this project with. So that's my input.
Oh, that'd be great to hear the perspective of design intent, and even just landscape architects are very patient people. I understand it takes a while for their visions and designs to be matured, and so very patient and long-sighted. Appreciate that.
Okay, so everybody who has their hand raised has had an opportunity to speak. So I'm going to lower everybody's hands. And if you'd like to speak again, then please raise them. So. And we have one more comment from Amory.
Yeah, just wanted to know, I forgot to mention it earlier, that I am a member of the Huntington Beach Historic Resources Board, along with Mrs. Shea. So.
Great.
Thank you. And then Lajari.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, this is my last comment. I was thinking a lot about the cherry blossom trees, and I know many people know that one of the traditions when you have cherry blossom trees is to enjoy them and sit in the park and have a picnic under the trees. So I'm hoping that, and just from my experience, I know that I often go there to the park and invite my friends, and we have big picnics in the park, and are able to sit under or near the cherry trees. I know the cherry trees themselves are finicky and their health can, you know, disappear. Sometimes I know some have fallen in the wild. A couple years ago, we had a lot of rain and one of the trees fell. I don't know if it was a cherry tree or not, but so I hope whatever is installed is does leave space near or by the cherry tree so families can definitely um, enjoy them. That's kind of really a big deal for people who like cherry trees. I don't know if there's any plans to maybe rearrange them in a healthier area. Hopefully that will be examined because there's some issues with their health and things like that. But I hope that is some kind of consideration, having enough space so that people can still enjoy the cherry trees on that side that curve around by the secret garden, so that families could still enjoy them with the picnic laying out, and not have maybe a path directly going or cutting in between those. So that's something I would vote for, that would be a little bit more organic and kind of wrap around or involve the cherry trees in that area. So, but I don't know much about the plants and their health, but I know it would be something that I would, like, especially as a parent, just laying out in that park, especially that area. My daughter loves to just lay up and look at the sky and the clouds and spread out and run around in circles in that open space. But that's something that they could still enjoy, something that people could still walk through and do flips and cartwheels and things like that. The kids just love that space particularly. I'm not sure why. I think it's just because it's very green and very lush, right? Particularly there.
Is that what we refer to maybe as the meadow area that's right off the path there in that open? I think
Yes,
that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
I believe so. I don't have a map, or I'm not sure what screen it might be on, but
I can go back to that. I'm going to see if I can get back to that screen just to look at that site plan. I should have considered that sooner here. Well, this image here probably shows that here. I think I'm kind of assuming it's this kind of nice green open space off here to the right in terms of the meadow area. Is that the area?
I believe so. Believe so. Across from the stage to
the stage would be off here to the right or off to our shoulder on the right. That path leads towards the stage. Library would be on the left.
Right next to the secret garden. So there's like that green area kind of nestled in between the different sides of the lake.
Right.
Yeah, I know that it's very lush. There's some kind of attraction there. Maybe the ground is softer. There's a good nestle of the cherry trees when they blossom, but I know parents and kids just love that area in particular, to lay out and stuff. So whatever's done, it would be nice if it kind of incorporated, but wrapped around or curved, or the grand could, just something that the kids still love to go there. I often see, children cartwheels and things like that in that space. So it would be nice if it was still kind of fun and still can get, enjoy walking and maybe kids running and playing.
Right. Well, that's terrific. Were there any more questions, Ashley? I'm kind of monitoring the Q&A here. I think we've answered most of them. If there's anyone that feels they have additional question there that we weren't able to read off or address.
I think Sherry has one more comment or question.
Yeah, because we're well aware that gardens degrade. There's always maintenance issues. I'm wondering about art installs. What is the plan for any maintenance? I mean, I don't want to be negative, but this is a public space and we do have the issues of every city as far as graffiti and just, stuff happens. How do we prepare and what is the thinking for long-term maintenance for something that is permanent in the park?
Sure. May I take a shot at that?
Sure, yeah.
Well, it's a great question, and there's a number of different ways to address it. First of all, from a program standpoint, many different public art committees, municipalities earmark a percentage that is kept in effect as a fund, an endowment, for the perpetual care of the work that they commission. And so I don't know if that exists right now with your program, but it's something that you should consider because, everything requires some periodic maintenance. Now, we always submit during and after a piece a maintenance recommendation, a list of considerations about how to properly take care of the piece. And so that might be an annual inspection, it might be checking electrical connections, it might be ways of getting paint, if it's been applied, off. One of the biggest things that is being discussed right now in public art, for example, is should we use graffiti materials to discourage graffiti? And, one of the thoughts is that they often change surfaces and you have to be very careful with selecting them for the type of material. Sometimes they do more harm than good, in other words. So a lot of our work, in fact, all of our work, is very conscious of a time factor. It's going to last. It's going to be made of materials that last. And so we've been very fortunate over the years that we have not incurred extensive vandalism. By the way, lighting is one of the biggest deterrents to vandalism. In the right location, public location, that's another deterrent to vandalism. In fact, there's a kind of ongoing joke in public art these days that the public is an incredible arbiter. If they like it, they take care of it. And so a lot of pieces, there's a certain kind of pride of ownership and protection that arises if the piece is well received. And so main thing, we'll give you recommendations for the right maintenance. And then, it takes somebody paying a little attention to it. Now, if you see people that are willfully, trying to hurt it, that becomes a whole nother issue. Because, the public is such that I remember the very first piece of public art that we were ever awarded. The first question that was arose was wear and tear and vandalism. And it was right after Michelangelo's Pietà had been attacked in a museum behind bulletproof glass with a guard standing next to it. And so when you do things out in the public, it is something that you simply have to take, into account that things can happen. Again, we've been very fortunate that that has not been the case, but maintenance recommendations, lighting, and annual periodic checkups of the piece. We even have a situation right now in a city where they cannot and will not move homeless people. And so, you know, we've been in discussions about ways of, you know, making it an inclusive experience, but also to deter people from sleeping there. And so that's just an issue. I don't think that that's going to arise here, but it's just something that a lot of different public art installations have had to look at.
All right.
I hope I answered your question.
And it looks like we have one more comment from Kathy.
Hi, am I there? Okay.
You're good.
Good. Okay. I think Ms. Engel's comment is incredibly important. And we consider at the Design Review Board sort of potential vandalism and opportunities. And I would point out that her comments are really valid, giving two pieces we have now at Central Park near the library. The first is Dancing Lady, who is cast in bronze. She was the first. We had a contest at Huntington Beach to choose artists to do things, and she was the first winner. And her arms were stolen. And stolen by people because they thought they could recycle her parts. We've never gotten the arms back. The piece is still there. Very much an engaged piece by the public, including she got her own COVID mask before. So she's very much a part, but she was vandalized. Secondly, we have this incredible piece right outside the front door of the library at the head of our rectangular fountains that is called Readily Apparent, donated by one of our very loyal and remarkable donors to begin with. And about 10 years ago, it's powder coated. There was scratches made in the surface. And the answer was, we'll give you another can of paint. So I really think it is important to consider Ms. Engel's comments about potential vandalism and make sure that we have something that is as impervious to that as we can make it, which I know is not complete, but we do have pieces this close to where we're talking about that have been suffered in this way. So I just want to get that out there and not sort of presume that, well, this is a cool place that nothing's going to happen. It could, and it has, and we need to be cognizant of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's good. Good information.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised or questions, so I think we may be able to move to the next part or.
Well, you know, I think we had designed those polls. We're just thinking if the dialogue was, we can go through those polls if we'd like, or if folks want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We're at an hour and a half into the presentation, so we're welcome if it spurs some additional dialogue. That was really, the poll questions were really just to, you know, spur dialogue.
Yeah,
and we've had some great dialogue already, and so, you know, we're welcome to sort of wrap up if we wanted to at this point, and we could do that. They're part of the Survey Monkey that we're putting out. And I think, Ashley, maybe you can share with us if there's any other questions, your thoughts on that?
Sure. So the Survey Monkey is already, at least it should already be queued up to go out to everybody who sent me their email prior to the meeting. And if it doesn't automatically go out like the system says, because this is my first Zoom webinar, then I will be sure to email out to everybody who RSVP'd to me tomorrow morning. So like you said, all of the questions are in the Survey Monkey, but if we want to go through the polling process real quick, we're more than welcome to.
Sure. Well, maybe it's just context even. Maybe the idea behind asking these questions was really just to talk about qualities, not to get into a specific answer so much as to say, you know, is there a favored approach to this being a large object or a multiple small objects? So really, I think we've had a lot of discussions already about landform, which was interesting to hear a couple of comments about that. So it's up to everyone if we'd like to just go to vote and kind of see what's happening, or, you know, I think the Survey Monkey might be a great way to
Yeah.
move on.
I think that, you know, we would like you to spend some time with these questions. And we heard wonderful observations tonight, but with a little time to digest them,
Yeah.
you may have some other things that you'd like to share with us. All of these are basically in that Survey Monkey.
Right.
And so we would get individual responses back anonymously if you take that survey.
And for instance, context, again, talking about experiential quality, we've had some great dialogue learning about that potential educational component and exploring the secret garden, making connections to what's happening with library programs. So thinking about that from your perspective, you know, what are those things that you value as far as an experiential quality? So, and I think this last question is really, Dave and I went back and forth on this a little bit. It's kind of interesting to talk about. It's I think deliberately we approach our work not to have a particular style that's informing the work. And so what we really like to do, though, is sometimes that's used to describe a kind of work. And so many times we find ourselves blending between things. And so I guess we just wanted to put that out there, that it's really something that this isn't necessarily going to directly inform that it's going to be an abstract piece or it's going to be a literal piece, but it helps us understand a little bit about your expectations and kind of things that you have experienced. And I think as we start to develop our concept, we'll be able to speak to qualities, these three qualities in the work. And so again, I think in the Survey Monkey, you have a chance to think about those and respond, and it'll all be part of what we study as we move forward. So. Is there anything else you'd like to add, David, to that, or?
No, it's just, this is a very exciting project, and you know, this is for us doing our due diligence. So we want to listen. And then we, of course, become filters to the process. You know, you wanted a piece of artwork, and we're artists. We just happen to have the resources of a company that can help us with technology and lighting and so many other things. But for us, we have to take what you give us, and then we've got to feel it. You know, we got to transform it and feel it. And so that's where we are right now. You know, we're trying to take all of these observations and put them together into something that feels right for that place and for us as artists. That's where we are.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, then with that, I don't know if we wanted to talk about next steps in the process after today, or just to kind of keep everybody in the loop on where we're headed.
Sure. I think with our schedule, what we're going to do is, I think we were hoping that we can try to gather all the responses from the Survey Monkey in a succinct way. So in a week or so, to have all the responses really to be impactful to our process as we start to ideate and develop concepts. So a week from tomorrow, Friday, February 5th, I think it is, if we can make sure that if you're interested and that's shared, we'd love to get that feedback as soon as possible. And then that's also in about 2 weeks, we will be coming back with some initial concepts and be sharing that with the steering committee. And I think we'll have a chance to also digest what we heard tonight and to dive deeper into a few of these avenues we talked about, some of the animals, some of the relationships to the garden, et cetera. And that'll be our first step then to start to articulate what if. And start to show some pieces and start to understand budget and start to understand scale and start to share that with the group and say, we think it could head this way, and it'll be a chance at sort of a preview of a concept. And that's in about mid-February that we'll be going through that process. And then we'll get additional feedback from that. And then there'll be a response and revision and more refinement. And then I believe it is in, help me with the dates, Doug. I don't have this in beginning of March, I believe it is, we'll have a package that's really close to be submitted as a package that visually shows color, understands a real firm scope of materials, is really aware of site conditions, drainage, slope, access, surrounding utilities. Can we get power if there does need to be power to the site? They'll start to get to another level of detail about realizing the piece. And so that's kind of the process then where we'll go to Kathy and others, I think, at the design review and the city to have comment and feedback and a process there.
All of this has to move along at a pretty good clip because, you know, we have an end date in mind. And so you're working backwards really from that. And so first we got to come up with something that we love and that you're excited about. And that hopefully is through some reiterations of this initial concept. Then that concept has to move into design development, DD. You may have heard that before. At that stage, we also have to, you know, work with an engineer because you've got to deal with the fundamental stuff of logistics and footings and wind load and, you know, all of those things to get a permit and stamp and seal an engineering document. And so before we would ever make anything, before it would ever go to a fabricator, I mean, we've got several steps along the way. And I think the first one, as Matt just pointed out, is really in a couple weeks, which means getting back your responses, the Survey Monkey, and gathering that information and reporting that back to you has got to come kind of simultaneously to us drawing things.
And it was clear from your questions tonight that there are people joining us who are on the historical board, the archivists, people who are involved with the Secret Garden. That's terrific. We'd encourage you to share that survey with your colleagues, with friends who have a connection to the place, and welcome input through that survey from people who weren't able to join us tonight. So by all means, share that link with people who care.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Lynn, I do see your hand raised if you wanted to give some final comments or had a question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, reiterate what was just said, that I think it's going to be really helpful to get input from more people that were on the call tonight, and doing the polling through that, you know, process of the survey is going to be really helpful because there's lots of people out there that I'm sure have an opinion and would love to contribute, and we want to hear from them. So this has just been a really exciting presentation tonight. I'm just thrilled for, you know, what might come out of this whole process. And I think it's something that Huntington Beach is going to be really proud of what the eventual installation is. So thank you, RDG. Thank you, everybody else that participated tonight. And moving on, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited.
This was great. Thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, thank you guys, and thank you everybody for attending. Keep an eye on your emails and feel free to share it. And we'll also get a the recording will get posted as well for anybody who may want to watch this again. So thanks everybody for your input, and we look forward to a great process and a beautiful piece of art at the end of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thank you all.
Good night.